Hello everybody. In this video we're going to talk about a very common programming mistake that I see and the motivation for it, or kind of how I'm going to kind of introduce the error, or kind of show you the error, is we're going to have a situation where I'm going to ask us to kind of code a function. I'm going to show you the common mistake, we're going to discuss why it's a mistake, and then we're going to talk about one easy fix to the mistake. There's two main ways that we're going to be able to fix the mistake. This video is going to cover one of them, and in the next video we'll cover a different way. So let's get started. I have here a template for a function called has_element. It's going to be called that for the reason that we want to think of this as has_element. It takes as an input a vector v and a number r, and as an output it wants I want it to return true if the number r is in the vector and false otherwise. So b here for Boolean. You don't have to call it that, but that's why I have it called b. Now, like I said, let's start by kind of writing the function incorrectly. So this might be kind of your first guess. So let's say for I equal to, and typically we've been doing equal to v. I'm going to show you a slightly different way that's just as good and is also common in other programming languages. So we can say for I equal to 1, go to the length of the vector v. Then what we're going to do is we're going to say if v at the position I is equal to the number r, we want b to be equal to true. Else, we want b to be equal to false. That's not how you spell false. There you go. And let's end. All right, so just to recap what we've done, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, it's the vector, we're going from 1 to the length of the vector. So if there's 5 elements, we check them one by one. So v of I is saying first check v1, then check v2, go all the way to the end. Then we're checking, is this element equal to r? If it is, b is equal to true. Otherwise, b is equal to false. So maybe pause the video and take 30 seconds to think about what is a little bit fishy about this. Why is it going to not do quite what we want? So I'm going to claim that all this function is going to do is check whether or not the very last element of our vector is equal to r. And if you don't believe me, let's go do a couple test cases. So first, let me just save this function. And then let's go back to MATLAB. So I'm going to say, okay, let's say my vector v is 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 7, 8, 11. There's my vector v. Let's say I want to check is 11 in the vector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say has element of my vector v comma 11. And remember, 1 means true, so that's good, yes. 11 is in the vector. What if we check something that's not in there? So maybe like 12. And that's 0, so that's working. But now let me show you where this goes wrong. So notice the number 3 definitely is in our vector. But now I'm going to do has element v comma 3. And somehow it's returned false, right? So that's not right. We want to have true because 3 is definitely here. So let's go back to the script. I'm going to show you, or sorry, the function, not the script. Let me talk a little bit about what's going wrong here. So what's happening is first we look at the first entry of our vector. So let's say v1, is this equal to r? If it's true, then b is equal to true. Otherwise, it's equal to false. But then what happens is we go back through the for loop. And let's say now I is equal to 2. Then we check, is v of 2 equal to r? If it is, then b is set to true. Otherwise, b is set to false. So do you see how the values of b are getting updated over and over again until we get to the very last element of the vector? Then we say, okay, is the last element equal to r? If it is, it's going to return true. Otherwise, it's going to be false. Then we've gotten to the end. So I goes from 1 to length of v. So we exit the for loop and we end the function. So that's what's going wrong with this. And like I mentioned at the start of the video, there's two very easy fixes. And I'm going to just show you one of them in this video. So let's see. I'm going to remove this else statement. And now what I'm going to do is at the very beginning of my function, I'm going to initialize b to be false. And the way you want to think about this is, imagine that we're saying, okay, I'm going to assume that the vector does not contain my element until proven otherwise. So until we find out that the vector does contain r, we're just going to say b is false. Then what's going to happen is we're going to say for I equal to 1 through length of v, so we're going to do the same thing. If v of I is equal to r, b gets set to true, and notice nowhere else do we change b. So b gets set to true if we find an element that's equal to r, and we can keep going through the for loop. If there's an element that's not equal to r, that's okay. It's not going to enter this if statement. Then we're going to go through the entire for loop, and we're going to end. So that's one method. Let me save it, and we'll go back and test it. So again, let's go back to has element v11. So remember, v is this vector 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 11. That worked. Remember, if we test it with something that's not in there, we want it to be 0. And here's the moment of truth. Remember, we had issues where we wanted to check is 3 in this vector. And we can see, yep, it gives us 1. We could try 4. Yep. So this does exactly what we want. So there is one big drawback of this method, and I'll explain it a little bit more in the next video. But what's going what's not going wrong, but kind of why this is not the most ideal way to code this is, imagine now that we had a vector with 1,000,000 elements or 1,000,000,000 elements, right? If basically as soon as we find one true, that's good enough. We only need to know that there's one element. But what's happening here is it's checking every single element. So for a vector that we can code by hand, that doesn't take very much time. But you can imagine now if there's millions of entries, as soon as we find that one that is equal to r, we want to exit the for loop and exit the function. So that's what we're going to talk about in the next video. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and I will see you there.